most charitably, this is a reference to a 1960 Sharpsville massacre where 69 black protesters died during fights with the police
That's
during a riot.
explicitly referenced in this, I think.
Oh, is it right? Okay, so yeah, it's just south of Johannesburg, but also, okay, yes, apartheid, wrong. Yes, resisting apartheid, fair enough. Is killing innocent civilians a good thing? Absolutely not. Is fighting with the police a good idea if you don't want to get killed, if you're not armed? No, it's pretty stupid. So excuse me if I don't have sympathy with a layer removed from the actual events for the people in this comic. Grant, it's just not a particularly persuasive nor accurate depiction of the events. But
it was a strike in Soweto that they were referencing here that's directly referenced. And they said that more than 700 children were killed that day and thousands were injured. Now, I did look into this, I remember at the time. So I read this again back around the Christmas period and looked into it at the time. So please, I'm sorry if I get some of the details wrong. But I remember even on the Wikipedia page, it said that it was speculated that 700 children had died. And when I looked into it, it seemed very likely that those sources for those numbers would have been coming from the ANC and from the protesters in the first place, who, of course, are going to try and exaggerate any numbers so that they can try and generate sympathy for themselves. That's what every cause does, ever, is you big up the numbers and you say, look, we're the victims, be on my side.
Right, okay. Well, that does make sense. I haven't personally looked into that one, but I do know that even with the Sharpsville massacre that they could have been referencing in the opening pages, fighting with the police means that you're going to get a violent backlash. I don't know what to tell you. I'm not justifying it. I have little sympathy for people who endanger their lives like that, frankly. So the reason for this issue is to make Bwana Beast a mantle to be passed off onto a black man. That is the express purpose of this, and it is also to denigrate the white settlers within South Africa who are now ingratiated into the land and often try to coexist with their black neighbors.
And get murdered brutally. Yeah. And there is also recently, when we're recording this, there was recently a Channel 4 documentary where a black guy in a wheelchair went into the settler town of Orania, which is, I think, one of the only remaining white settlements in South Africa, where it's probably the only part of South Africa that actually works in any meaningful way, as in there's not just horrible destitution on every street, violence erupting every single day.
The power's still on.
The power is still on. It's people trying to build a civilization for themselves that works. They're not bothering anybody else by doing it. They're just saying, leave us to it. Channel 4, send in a black guy to say, well, you're all white supremacists. Don't you understand how scary it is for me to be here? It's so dangerous. When they're all there trying to just get along, have little have get-togethers. It seems like it's a genuinely wholesome community. And this guy comes in with his racial grievances, saying that because of the fact that you are white people who aren't being forced to coexist with black people who want to murder you, this is racism and I want it stopped.
Yeah, quite. That documentary sounds like it's characterizing all of the white South Africans in the same way that Morrison characterizes them through the character of the police chief in this, as doing everything they can up until saying the N-word to denigrate black people in the comic. So, no, the majority of white South Africans are not murderous racists, and I don't like how it's depicted in this way. But no, just to go over the events in this, so Mike Maxwell, who's Bwana Beast, explains that the prior Bwana Beasts were black, except for one of them, who was a deserter during the Boer War. So that implies that the only possible white hero in Africa, Kilimanjaro here, but also South Africa, has to be someone who steps away from the colonial lifestyle and stops things like, oh, I don't know, the slave trade, and introduces things like the wheel. How horrible. So there's a
if I'm remembered correctly as well, I believe that most of the territory of South Africa hadn't even been claimed by anybody by the time that we got there. And it was, in fact, a battle between the Bantu who were moving into that territory at the same time. So it was contested territory in the first place. It wasn't like anybody had claimed it. We weren't stealing it from anybody.
And didn't the Bantu kill tons of other groups within sub-Saharan Africa and North Africa?
The Bantu are one of the most genocidal peoples to ever exist. That's when they moved throughout Africa, because originally they were just in West Africa. They moved through it, destroying thousands of ethnic groups, including people. Well, I think the Khoisan, the Bushmen, still exist, but in much smaller numbers than they ever used to.
So diversity is our strength, and we're all Wakanda. Got it. Understood. So during this, as a prison official one of the police chiefs, Mr. Van der Voort, and he attempts to fake anti-apartheid activist Dominic Mwande's hanging, but then Dominic is saved by Animal Man and Bwana Beast from the cell because the helmet has said he's the next Bwana Beast. Dominic is really ungrateful for being saved, and also for being granted the powers of Bwana Beast, because he says the white imperialist title has got to go.
Yeah, there you go. He's a colonizer, he's imperialist. Grant Morrison is a lefty wanker and can't wait to remind you at every turn.
Yeah, so Grant Morrison has inherited the character created by people before him and is now, by virtue of calling Bwana Beast an oppressive, colonizing character, calling the prior people who created the characters that he now makes money writing racists. What a turd. Okay, all right. And then also, and you know what? Bit Schmittian here, but he says, Bwana Beast must be remade in the image of South African race politics because, quote, in South Africa, Mr. Maxwell, nothing is beyond politics anymore. I agree, which is why I hate your shitlib vegan race politics. I find it intolerable.
So what this is suggesting to me, we already said diversity is our strength, is that the diversity has caused divisions within South Africa, which has meant that conflict has inevitably broken out and meant that no realm is beyond politics, basically meaning no realm is beyond conflict, because that's what politics is, being friend, enemy. And so, yeah, let's import all of that onto our tiny island. Great idea.
Not just import all of that. If nothing's beyond politics, and Grant Morrison sees the only legitimate politics as being those of the total reclaiming of South Africa by black people, even though, as we've gone through the anthropology, that wasn't the case before, that means that Grant Morrison is essentially endorsing the Julius Malema position of white genocide. Great, really appreciate that during Animal Man. So Van der Voort decides to feign a dispersal order as a pretext to supposedly kill millions of people in the crowd of apartheid protesters.
Again, in the same way that the hunters earlier on in the first 4 issues were just malevolent psychopaths itching to get any chance to not just hurt animals, but to hurt people as well. These guys are just malevolent psychopaths itching for any excuse to shoot black people.
Yeah, well, I know South Africa was part Dutch settlement, part British settlement, but that is just historically anachronistic because the only time that would have ever happened in the history of the British Empire, at least, was the Amritsar massacre, and that was 1,000 people, and the person who did that was immediately stripped of his honours by Parliament and had his ability to govern taken away. So, no, the British Empire was not committing black genocide. Actually, it was black people committing black genocide, but there you go. So he shoots Maxwell, and then he sneaks off to try and kill the Archbishop, because Animal Man opens a bunch of fissures in the earth to sink all their military and police vehicles. And Dominic, who's now called himself Freedom Beast, is killed. Dominic kills Van der Voort by creating a zebra-unicorn fusion because Van der Voort had mentioned a unicorn at some point in the cell. So Freedom Beast just straight up just murders this guy, which, again, nothing is beyond friend enemy, nothing is beyond race politics. Therefore, this is something that should be done to all of the white settlers.
Once again, Grant Morrison saying, well, my enemies are the most evil people who ever existed. Look, I drew them murdering innocent children. Therefore, I can send a unicorn zebra to murder them graphically.
Yeah, quite. If you want a bit of good news, Freedom Beast does actually die during Cry for Justice. Which is a much better comic as well. And I like the art in here, but it's got even better art. Also, one personal annoyance before we end this off. They include Perry White. If you look at Perry White, that's not Perry White. That is not how he is drawn in the concurrently running John Byrne Man of Steel.
Yeah, you're right, actually, yeah.
Yeah, he doesn't look anything like that. So, continuity fail by Morrison and team there. How frustrating.
But then again, they were playing Chinese whispers with this whole thing, so it's no surprise that they had no idea what was going on. Did Grant Morrison even realize he was writing for DC at the time, I wonder?
Probably not. It's probably on some sort of narcotic. So, on to the next issue. Nothing really happens. Buddy keeps showing up. His time-displaced self keeps showing up around his home, and Grant Morrison himself appears in the book for the first time because Highwater gets displaced along Grant Morrison's walking route because he's interacted with the Psycho Pirate.
Wakes him up. And Grant Morrison makes sure to fill every panel with massive loads of tedious narration boxes where he's thinking really pretentious thoughts to himself, like the interference patterns of concentric circles, like bomb impact diagrams. He's describing the ripples on water as rain falls onto it, like telepathic powers in comics, like the cup and ring marks on megalithic stones, like patterns on a holographic plate, the symbol of David Bohm's implicate order theory. A vision. Grant, you're 105 IQ. We get it. We understand. You desperately want to be 130 plus IQ Anglo. You're not there. You're not there. You had one clever idea and you are milking it for all you're worth. And now you are going on these extended, annoying, boring existential rambles to yourself, which once again, as you pointed out, as critical as you can be of Watchmen and Alan Moore, and there is plenty to be critical of with Watchmen, with its nihilistic attitude that it presents, existentialism as a concept was explored much more gracefully through the character of Dr. Manhattan, rather than Grant Morrison finding the most pretentious, fancy pants ways to go rippling water as rain falls onto a stream.
Yeah, if he's wandering through miserable parts of Scotland for inspiration, I didn't need to see that. You're literally writing a comic about how you don't know how to write comics. Thanks for wasting my $4.99 a month. Right, so we'll skip this issue because there's literally nothing else in it other than Buddy Baker showing up a few times around his own home, and you get a foreshadowing of the guy that will eventually shoot his family. If I was getting this monthly, I'd be pissed. So on issue 15, we get another annoying animal rights issue.
I think it's this one and then the monkey one, and then it's done.
Yep.
So your animal rights message is confined to 4 of the worst written issues of your own comic book.
And I have real issues with this issue on the historical record, not just from a writing perspective. Now, this issue is dull. Essentially reunites Animal Man with 2 of his old members of the Forgotten Heroes group that I mentioned before, and it's Dolphin and Cave Carson and also Dane Dorrance of the Sea Devils. And they all disbanded after Immortal Man sacrificed his life in Crisis on Infinite Earths. That's not really referenced properly in here. So for people who haven't read the original Animal Man, they might be confused as to why all of these characters are in one place. But the main point of the issue is that they're trying to stop an annual dolphin murder festival. I think it's off the coast of Norway or somewhere like that. One of my main issues with this, and anyone who's read the works of Michael Schellenberger, like Apocalypse Never will know, is that it wasn't the Greenpeace Treaty or the United Nations that stopped whaling, because that was a main issue in the 20th century. It was both the discovery of things like vegetable oil and fossil fuels, which meant that we didn't need to go and kill whales for lamp oil anymore. And then the collapse of the Soviet Union. You know, the body that was funding those South African apartheid activists that you supported, Grant? You know, the weird communism that you seem to have flirted with? That body was killing the majority of whales. So whaling peaked in 1962, and this is according to Schellenberger, 13 years before Greenpeace's heavily publicized action in Canada. The United Nations called for a 10-year moratorium in 1972, and the US banned whaling under the Maritime Protection Act. And then by 1975, the year of Greenpeace's celebrated Vancouver action, an international agreement between 46 nations had prohibited all the hunting of the humpback, blue whale, and grey whale, and some species of right fin and sea whales, and it was already in place. So innovations, and the US actually prevented the whaling stuff, not Greenpeace, not the UN, etc. But then it was communism that made whaling worse than it needed to be. After the fall of communism, historians found records that the Soviet Union was whaling at far higher numbers than they had originally admitted. It did so even though it was no longer profitable to do so, thanks to Soviet central planning. 98% of the blue whales killed globally after the ban in 1966 were killed by Soviet whalers, as were 92% of the 1,201 humpbacks killed commercially between 1967 and 1978. So no,
Jesus Christ, 98 and 92%.
Yeah, so no, it wasn't your weird hippie animal rights groups or your communists that saved the whales. It was the US and it was energy innovation. So stick it up your arse, Grant.
Yeah, and this is it's the same as all the other times that he's tackled the animal rights issues or any political issues within this, which is presenting an incredibly thin straw man going, this person who's a whaler is the most evil person to ever exist, that he's a bloodthirsty maniac who just wants to see animals suffer for no reason, and therefore bad things must happen. But he does switch up the formula a little bit here, which is one of the dolphins, I think it is, that he's trying to kill, gets hold of him, and instead of being given a bloodthirsty, sadistic death
at the hands of Animal Man,
at the hands of Animal Man or someone, he instead gets dropped off at a beach because we need to remind everybody, oh, animals are so much more moral and kind than us. I guess he missed out the part where the dolphin probably raped him. Because dolphins aren't the most moral animals ever. I mean,
they do molest pufferfish. Yeah, you're right.
For a guy who loves animals so much, he seems to have no understanding of them whatsoever, other than oh, I saw some Peter adverts where they pulled a sad face at me, so they're better than us.
It's literally the Patrice O'Neill's puppy in a cup bit.
Yeah, exactly.
Ooh, hi, I'm White Lady.
Yeah, that's all it took for him.
To watch the full video, please become a premium member at lotuseaters.com.